welcome back to another video. So in the intro montage of this episode, I am playing machinist. Heavy quotation marks around that. But what I am doing is getting the holes drilled in each of the runners on the Supra's new intake manifold for the nitrous bungs. So I ordered these 16th NPT welding female bungs, and with my drill process, they are locating something like that on the sides of the velocity stacks. So I did all the drafting and everything else in the intro montage, as well as the pilot holes. So I'm using a 3-step drill process. I used a 1/4 inch bit to drill the initial pilot holes. I'm using a 13/32 bit to enlarge the holes, so I'm not having to remove as much material with the 3rd step, which is this 5/8 drill bit right here that gets the holes out to the size that they need to be for these bungs to sit in place appropriately. So this isn't all that exciting, just drilling a few holes, but let me get these finished up, and then we can move on to actually welding the bungs into the velocity stacks, getting everything located. Once they are located, then we can weld everything together. Well, it's now time for the main event, or at least what I've been waiting for this entire manifold build. And that is to start the finish welding. So everything is tacked together, and as you guys saw, I used the direct port bungs to make sure that all of the runners are level and square and everything else. And from what I can tell, we're ready to start welding at this point. So we have the seams at the head flange, we have the bottom sides of each of the 6 velocity stacks, and then the top sides of them as well. So we have 18 welds in total to do, and I couldn't be more excited for it. So one thing I am going to do, I drug my flare torch over here, and I'm going to put a good preheat into all of this. As between the flange itself and my fixture plate / heatsink block, it's going to take a lot of heat to weld this correctly. And I think the best way to do that is to manually apply heat to it before I even strike the first arc. So I'll get all this heated up pretty nicely, get it nice and toasty, and then we can strike the arc and start melting everything together. after yesterday's welding session, the lower section of the Mark IV's new intake manifold is completed. And I'm pretty happy with the way that this came out. Now, there's certainly room for improvement, but that is the case whenever you are building parts like this. But moreover, this section is ready to be put into the full assembly. But to do so, I need to work on the plenum a little bit more. And the first thing I need to do on it is to trim off the excess of each of the filler panels. So like I said, I built these a little bit longer than they needed to be, so that way I could get in and do the welds on the corners of each of the filler panels. And that makes it really easy, or makes it easier, I should say, to do the welding, but I need to trim off that bit of excess. So let's go ahead and knock that out, and then we can see about putting the plenum onto the runners and the floor plate and the rest of the assembly. Well, I'm just about ready to do final fitment of the plenum to the runners and the flange and everything. But there is one issue that you will run into whenever you're working on something like this. Long, straight, flat panels, like an intake manifold, intercooler end tank, etc. Things along those lines. And what the issue is the center of these panels, or these panels kind of warping inwards. Now you can see on the ends here, and this is not final fitment, so just bear with me, but we have a nice outside corner joint set up, and then it gradually sinks in, then comes back out, and leaves us with a nice outside corner joint back here. And it's kind of the same story on this side. Nice joint, not nice joint, and nice joint up here. So this, if you haven't done this before, can be the moment of panic where it's like, oh crap, I just put all this work into this part and now it doesn't fit. It doesn't work right. What do I do? Don't worry, I have an easy solution. So let's take a look at that right now. So this solution is, like I said, pretty simple, but pretty effective. And what you need for it are a couple of blocks or pieces that are fairly rigid. I like to use these purge blocks of mine for this. And you also need a couple of pry bars. So what we'll do is put the pry bars in between our rigid pieces, and if you see, if I push out with the pry bars, then very quickly it'll bend your workpiece into place. So you have to be careful that you get the pry bars lined up appropriately, as if you do not, then you may end up snapping your fingers with them, which is not very fun. But all that you need to do really is just work along the plenum or the end tank or whatever you need to stretch out, and just tweak it a little bit here, tweak it a little bit there, and then test fit your piece and see where you've ended up with it. So with that little bit of tweaking, let's see how this all fits together. So, I think, yeah, you go that way. And if I line everything up, I actually may have stretched it a little bit too much, but that's all that it takes. It's that easy. And I can come in with a clamp or something like that. And it's always better to have it be a little bit too expanded as opposed to a little bit too little expanded. But at this point, these joints, I'm perfectly fine with, and I can get everything tacked together and get it ready to final weld. Well, I got a little bit ahead of myself in tacking the plenum as much as I did to the lower section, as I still need to weld the throttle body flange on. But the throttle body flange is located. It's in a position where it will work for the new intercooler tube. Everything's good to go there. So I need to pull this whole assembly back off of the engine. I need to break the plenum off of the runners and the whole lower section of it, as I'm going to weld the outside of the throttle body flange as well as the inside of it. And at that point, I should be good to go to weld the plenum to the lower section then. So a little bit of moving backwards to move forwards, but I can only blame myself for that, and not the end of the world. Days like today that I'm very thankful for my water-cooled TIG torch. But that being said, the manifold is now mostly welded. All of the huge components, or all of the main components, are all welded together. And this thing is fresh off the press. I just got done welding it a couple of minutes ago, and it is still scalding hot. It's like 9,000 degrees right now.
It's over 9,000!
But that being said, I'm really happy with the way that this weld came out. The plenum to floor plate weld, I took the time to set up a nice outside corner joint, which essentially what that is you take the two pieces of material, and rather than this, which for example, this piece butting right up to the edge of this one, you align the corners. So you create a channel to weld in, and it helps with A, the weld tracking in a nice predictable path, a nice predictable pattern, and B, it helps with penetration that way as well. So I don't have any worries about the plenum detaching from the rest of this, or the rest of the manifold, and I'm very happy with the way that it is coming out. So Like I said, the majority of the work is done at this point, but we have a few other additions that need to be added to this manifold. Right now, I need to wait for this to cool down so I don't nuke my hands trying to get this off of here or end up warping the flange worse than it already is warped. But that being said, in a little bit, once this is cooled down, it can come off and we can start figuring out where reference bungs are going to be located, as I have all of those here right now. And we can get those installed in the meantime while I'm waiting on the burst panel to come in. The next things that need to be installed on the intake manifold are reference bungs. So I need at least 3, and I'm going to put 1 or 2 extra bungs in here as well for any future additions or if I need extra ones, so on and so forth. And with the theme of this manifold being accessibility, I mean, that was kind of the entire impetus for building this new manifold. Moving the secondary injectors up to the top side so I can actually access them more easily, keeping the nitrous nozzles in an easily accessible location, etc., etc. I want to make the reference bungs easier to access than the previous ones were. And if we take a look at the old manifold, then you can see that the bungs were on the bottom side. And that is fine, but if and when I do need to detach the lines to pull the intake manifold, if one of the lines gets messed up, so on and so forth, I want them to be in a little bit easier to access location than up on the bottom side of the manifold. And I think back kind of on this outside radius of this tube, and of this bend right here, I think that will be a good location for it, or for them. Now, I can still reach with 1 line, 2 lines, and the 3rd line. They can reach without issue. So I think that will be a reasonable location for them. I have 4 bungs pulled out already. I need to pull out a 5th so that way I can determine if I do want 5 in there. But I'll at least figure out where the foremost of these bungs will be located, and then I can put the remaining 3 to 4 in kind of in a straight line from there. The last outstanding item for the Mark IV's new intake manifold has arrived. And this is what I have right here. So before we get into the product, this is from Bergman Prototyping. and John Bergman is the one who runs Bergman Prototyping. I met him off of eBay, and he was kind enough to make this burst panel frame assembly for me. And as you can see by the back of his shirt right here, he has a pretty wild small tire Chevelle. It's a really cool car, and John is a really good dude. So Bergman Prototyping, he does a bit of medical device prototyping, as well as some automotive stuff, and pretty much any type of product development in CNC machining that you can imagine. So he did a really nice job making this burst panel assembly for me. It has this, which is the lower frame section, and then it has this, which is the upper frame section. And this is what actually, or I guess, the burst panel will sandwich in between these two pieces, be held in place and sealed up and everything else. And if you guys are not familiar with what a burst panel is, it is a plate that is designed to rupture at a certain pressure. Now that pressure, I believe, is usually 200 to 250 psi, somewhere in that range. And the purpose of the burst panel is, on an intake manifold, if you have an overwhelming and undesired amount of pressure inside of it from something like a nitrous backfire or a big backfire like that, the burst panel will rupture and allow that pressure to escape, as opposed to potentially filleting your intake manifold open and causing you to have to do some costly repairs or a costly intake manifold replacement, worst case. So a burst panel is essentially just cheap insurance for an expensive or elaborate intake manifold. And with this being a nitrous car as well as a turbo car, I figured it would be a good thing to include on it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and figure out where the burst panel, or at least the frame section, is going to be located, and then do the work that is involved with actually getting it placed on the side of the plenum. So one of the things that I want to pay attention to as I install this burst panel assembly is the location, or the possible location, of egress for pressure and everything else if this were ever to backfire and blow the burst panel out. So I want to be cognizant of any lines or anything that is sensitive around here, and I don't want to have it on the bottom side of the manifold, as if it does blow the panel out, then that necessitates removing the manifold to replace the panel. That's a nightmare. I don't want to deal with that. I also don't want to have it anywhere near the brake lines, anywhere near fuel lines, anywhere where there is, like I said, there are sensitive items there, items that wouldn't fare that well under all of that pressure. So I think the best location for it will be probably right around here somewhere. And I'll build a little a sheet metal tab deal, or a sheet metal strip that will go along the bottom side of this burst panel frame, something like that, as to direct this where I want it to be. If you guys can see in here, there is going to be a bit of a gap on this side down to where the plenum is. So this won't be all that bad. I'll take some of the 3/16 sheet that I have, and I'll cut a 1-inch strip off of it, and then bend something up that matches as closely as I can 3 sides of the perimeter of this piece, and then I can cope the 2 short sides and leave the long side intact. And I think that'll look pretty cool and pretty neat, nice and clean. And most importantly, it will locate this in a position where, if it's placed right here, the only thing that it's going to hit if the panel blows out is the bottom side of the hood. And it will keep everything away from the overflow, from the map sensor, from all of that. And it also will hide this ugly portion of this plenum weld right here, which I'm very happy about as well. time is now here to locate and install the provisioning for the burst panel on the Mark IV's new intake. But first, let's take a look at how this came together. So we have the burst panel flange right there. You can see the coping on the strip on both sides, and it comes down to this rectangular side right here. On the inside, I welded all around, and I also plugged up the through holes on the bottom side, as the fasteners that John sent out with this whole burst panel frame assembly, they are short enough where I can plug up the bottom sides of the through holes, so that way I'm not risking an air leak or anything like that. And I don't have to worry about the bolts or the fasteners getting into these welds. So I think this burst panel is going to be located somewhere, something like that. And you can see the provision on the side of it right there. But what I need to do at this point is mark out the location of this this burst panel deal that I've built so far. Get it marked out, get the hole cut into the manifold, and then it's just a matter of welding that piece that I built onto the side of the manifold. Well, we're down to the last final significant addition to the new intake manifold. And that is to mount the nitrous rail. Now, I took the old mounting bracket and I flattened it out so that way I can transfer over the fastener hole locations to whatever new bracket that I come up with. But one thing that I did want to show is the actual burst panel itself. So I have one mocked up in there right now, so that way this whole burst panel frame assembly can be fastened together, and I can account for that size and those dimensions. But the burst panel itself, I bought a few of them, so that way if I do pop one, I'm not kind of caught up the creek without a paddle. So the burst panel, it's a pretty simple deal. It's just a piece of metal, and you can see it does carry an SFI spec. But on the back side, you can see that there are engineered weak points on it. And these panels, like I said earlier in the video, are designed to rupture at a certain pressure. So you can think of it as a pressure-based fuse, essentially. So if the system becomes overloaded with pressure, then this will rupture, will provide a path of egress for that pressure, and will prevent you from blowing the intake manifold apart. So all that being said, we're going to mount pretty much the reason why the burst panel is in place here with this nitrous rail. So hopefully this won't be all that bad or all that difficult to do. I think I'll just make another simple stainless bracket similar to this one, but I'll alter the dimensions a little bit, as I want this rail to sit much lower to this top portion of the plenum here, and I don't want the mounting tab or mounting little bracket deal all the way down on the side of the manifold with this piece wrapping up along the side. I think I can make it a little bit cleaner with a more consolidated, smaller mount. So that's what we're going to do. And with that, the last items added to the manifold, the last cleanup work done, etc., etc., the Mark IV's new intake manifold is completed and ready for powder. So the final end result of this, I could not be happier with it. It's everything that I wanted it to be and more, and I'm very proud of myself for this piece. And it's unlike any intake manifold that I've built before. So starting from tip going to tail, we have the Ross Machine Racing 90mm throttle body with 4-inch Wiggins conversion. We have all of the beautiful Race Part Solutions tubing that made building this Plenum a breeze. We have John Bergman Prototyping's beautiful burst panel frame and flange and all of that, especially fasteners, burst panel itself. The nitrous outlet direct port rail is now mounted, fixed in position with a lower profile and cleaner mounting solution. The Autosports Engineering head flange made this whole project a breeze, as well as the Ross Machine Racing tubing and velocity stacks. And the Ashcraft Machine and Supply, my local metal supply house, the miscellaneous aluminum sheet and other components, they came in clutch with that stuff as well. So at this point in time, the manifold is ready to go to powder coat. I'm going to hold off on that just for a little bit longer as I need to mount the fuel rail still. I have these two beautiful Ross Machine Racing billet fuel rail mounts, and they just go on the rail like so. So I'll just have to drill 2 holes through the fuel rail, and I'll more than likely end up cutting them off right about here and doing some modifications so that way they will fit better and be better suited for the Autosports Engineering head flange. But all those things aside, all of the difficult work is completed, and this manifold minus powder is ready to go into service. But with all of those things being said, and this project, like I said, essentially wrapped up at this point in time, I think that'll be a good place to leave off for this episode. So I'll get the last bits wrapped up on this off camera most likely, so that way we can just take the manifold out to Ryan at Late Apex Performance Coatings, have him work his magic rather to take this from raw aluminum to a different finish that will better suit the rest of the engine bay. And then at that point in time, it'll be time to build the new fuel lines, make the new nitrous hard lines, make the new intercooler tube, and then start this thing up and hear what it sounds like. If there is any audible difference, I doubt it on the intake side, or with a new intake manifold rather. But make sure there are no leaks or anything crazy like that. And then my work essentially will be done, and it'll be time to take this thing back to the dyno and get ready to make some hits. So we have a lot to look forward to with this car. 2025 should be a really cool and really fun season with this thing, and I cannot wait to get behind the wheel again, make some hits, and see just how quick and fast we can go. But all of those things will be coming in the future. Right now, I think this video has ran long enough, and I'm not starting on another project right now. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. So thank you guys, as always, for coming along on all of these different journeys and all of these different adventures with me. The Mark IV is rapidly coming to a close. The SC, minus a set of tires and some brakes, is ready to go out and begin street tuning. And the Aristo over here, well, its time to shine is just about here. I really can't wait to get started on this car, and hope that you guys are looking forward to it as well. But like I said, all of those things are coming in the future. Right now we're done with this one. So that's about all I have for you right now. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, check out the website for manifolds, for merch, for all things good that way, including my MCB collection. You can see I'm wearing one of the MCB beanies right now, and I have a variety of different apparel and accessory options, all in the same gray and multicam black colorway. So If that speaks to you, or if any of my other apparel or product offerings do, please feel free to pick anything up off of the website that does speak to you and that you are interested in. And if nothing right now does, well, hopefully I offer something in the future that you would like to add to your collection. But with all of that being said, that'll be the end of this one, and I will see you guys in the next episode.